for which you are writing that report. So the first thing is that you need to be clear why you are writing. If you are clear, only then you can move towards the next step, which is why the audience has to read that report. What's so important within that report? If you are clear, you'd be able to convince your audience as well. So therefore, not just the topic, but you have to link it with the purpose as well. That's why it is important. This is the reason because of which it has significance related to an issue that I want to resolve. So this is my purpose of resolving it by providing some recommendation. Once you are clear about the topic and you know how to define your purpose, the next thing to consider is the target audience, that is going to be your addressee. As written over here, addressing a client or a manager, it could differ in case of an academic environment, but the nature of reader also determines the kind of report which is expected to be written and its format. So this is also an important point for which you as a writer should be clear, and you have to convince your target audience as well, and remembering the kind of nature which they have, what to prepare and what to write within that report. So that is how it is also a point that should be clear within your point and that you should remember while drafting and preparing your report. The next point to remember is your format and your headings. There could be some variations depending upon the kind of report that you are writing. There could be certain sections which might be coming first, as we would be observing within our next lecture, where we will be providing you a general concept of deductive and inductive report. You're going to realize that there is a difference between the structuring, and within that same structuring the format would be changing as well. Within that same format also comes the order of the headings as well, and the use of decimals. So you'd be able to understand, and you need to make yourself clear how to use them, how to apply them when your own turn is here to prepare your own report. The next point is very much clear, as we have discussed it. It's all about maintaining your language and keeping it objective, because if it's objective, it's based on factual information. And on the basis of these all factors, you're going to achieve success. But one thing which is also very much important is your research skills. These research skills are going to determine how effective you are in identification of a problem, in its detailed analysis, and then based on that analysis you have found some results. How do you interpret it, and how do you provide your solutions, and how effective they are? All of it would be dependent upon how good you are and basically your research skills. So now once the expectations are clear, we can look towards the basic purpose. As discussed in the previous slide, you need to be very much clear why you are doing this, and it's the same thing that you have to convince your audience as well. But another angle of looking into it is that what basically a report itself does, talking about its structure. So we can make it easier for you to understand that while drafting and preparing your report, what points are required to be considered. What are the essential components that it should achieve once you have written the report. So if I talk about the report's purpose, first thing is the provision of information. You are given a task, you have been given a problem. After a careful analysis and finding some results, you have to provide the detailed discussion based on those analyses. So, in other words, you are becoming a source of information. Once that information has been provided, it will lead towards the element of persuasion. Based on your findings, you persuade your audience towards an action. But for that action, basically you need to do another thing, which is basically influence. So that is also another important component and purpose of your report, that based on your persuasion and based on that information that you have provided, as it's based on facts and figures, it's factual information and it's objective, you're able to change the perspective, the outlook and the ideologies of your audience, and that will lead towards initiating a future course of action. So all are basically connected with one another, but now you have the idea that that is how all these four functions are important and interrelated with one another. I can simply form a cycle to make you realize that that is how all these four fundamental purposes are connected. And once you are clear about the purpose, now we can move ahead to see what basically is the significance. Why is it so important? Although if we just go back and start with the background when I just gave you a brief introduction of why report writing is important, so I gave you a good idea of how it's useful, but just to give you a quick overview and a review, I would say, of what we have discussed earlier. So it's basically a written account of all the communication which is happening and initiating some future course of action within a company, within a firm, within an office or an organization. So it's a form of communication which follows a hierarchy as well. Another point to consider here, because that is how it is being connected with all the points which are written over here. Because this hierarchy is maintained, and this hierarchy also determines the mode of report writing which has to be chosen for the information of the information which is basically provided within that report, the mode of that information, the manner in which that information is provided. So it is determined by hierarchy. And now if we look at the relationship which exists between the different employees, the different sections within the different departments of an office, so that is how it basically appears, that you have a relationship between employer to employee. The communication happens in this manner. Then between colleagues, of course, we have communication taking place between employee to employee, and then moving onwards, we have this communication starting from the lower strata and moving towards the higher authority. So it can go this way as well, and we can also move towards the upper part. And the manner in which report is basically written would also vary depending upon that situation. Now, as we know the significance, we can move towards the relevance. How pertinent it is. What is basically the relevance, or you can call it as the utility. What does it do if we are using this mode of report writing? So what can be considered as the outcome of learning this or using this mode of communication within a professional environment? So you can clearly see from the very first point that it's the means of internal communication. So I've already given you the context, the environment in which the professionals have to interact. So that communication and its written account is maintained using this report. So it's a means of internal communication. Secondly, if you have a written account of something, you can always quote back, you can give reference of it before taking any decision. So for that planning and for decision making, it acts as a facilitator. Therefore, I can say that it's basically a mode of facilitating the decision making process. Then if we talk about the third importance or utility of this report, that basically it's a source of providing an unknown information. Because basically, what was the thing at the very beginning? There was a problem. And based on that problem, a study was carried out, and then some new results and findings were obtained. So what is this new results and findings? And unknown information, it was not known before, which was revealed by the researcher or the person who has conducted the study and then providing the results in the form of a report. So this is also another function, another utility of this report. So keeping in view the last point, which is basically regarding sharing of information with the employees. So just think of that same relationship in which the persons working within an organization interact. So there is a cycle, there is a hierarchy that we talked about. So if the employer has the information and it has to be disseminated among all the employees, so the report is going to be that source of providing information from that main source to all the rest of the employees. So these are some of those factors which can become the application or the utility of this report writing process. Moving ahead, these are some of the attributes now that we can infer based on all the components and all the points that we have so far covered and so far studied. If you just give them a reading, our report is a methodical, well-planned document which outlines and evaluates a subject or a problem. So this is basically a manner or a way of giving you the concept of report, or you can just comprehend the basic idea what it basically does. It's like a review of what you have so far understood and gained by just going into the detail of the significance and the relevance and the basic structure of the report writing process, the basic introduction that you have gained so far. So basically it's well planned, based on a method, and provides an outline as well, and then evaluates a subject or a problem. This is basic focus. You have a subject matter, you have a problem. Based on that problem, you move towards the outline, and then you design that method, well-planned method, and then you simply provide your data, your statistics, and your solution in the form of a well-planned document. So things are very much related to each other, one of the attributes. Then moving onwards, it has to be very short, sharp, and concise document, which means no need to go into the details, just written for a particular purpose and a particular audience. Again, highlighting the fact that you need to keep in mind the nature of your audience for whom you are preparing that report. Talking about the third point, it basically analyzes a situation or problem, often making a recommendation for future course of action. So as I mentioned earlier, when you identify, when you examine, and then you organize that information, the purpose is to provide a recommendation for the future course of action. After all, you have to initiate something. So this is your goal. And how do you do all these three attributes? By providing and maintaining a factual paper. Therefore, your needs should be made very much clear, and it has to be well structured when we talk about the report. So that is how I have tried to simply give you a review of what we have covered and what we have understood regarding the report. Some other points to consider which are coming ahead are like as follows. Now if we talk about the features of a well-written report, when for example you are given and you are assigned this task of preparing a report, so how are you going to make it a very effective and a very perfect report that you're going to get a straight away a tick on what you have done so far, totally perfect, and an approval by a professor in case of a working environment, by a boss? What features are very much essential when you overall start the report writing process, and what needs to be there within that report? First thing is your own clarity of thought. If you are clear, you would know how you have to perform on the task. And if you are clear, you will know how to present it in front of your audience. Therefore, the clarity of thought becomes important and number one component of this report writing process.